Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad wa barik wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Thank you for once again joining us for the Iqbal Study Circle. As you all know, last week we had the chance to finish off the Jawab al-Shiqwa, alhamdulillah. Today what we're going to be doing is two things. Number one, we're going to be doing a brief summary and discussion about the entirety of Jawab al-Shiqwa with Dr. Abdul Rahman. And then along with that discussion, I wanted to introduce you all to an appeal, Faryad, that was written by Dr. Abdul Rahman at the end of the book, if you have it. It's a really nice read. I was going through it and I felt that it would be very helpful for us to actually discuss this today. Basically, it's about where are we today in respect to Iqbal's Shiqwa and Jawab al-Shiqwa. And I wanted to, inshallah, provide my own perspective eventually after Dr. Abdul Rahman provides his own. And we can talk about it as to where are we close to over 100 years after this this was recited. And I think now it's been, it was written in 1911, right? We had said that Jawab al-Shiqwa was read, and now it's 2021, so 110 years later. And I know, Dr. Saab, with this book, when I was reading the Faryad, you had mentioned that this is now 2011, right? I think this was 10 years ago you had put this together. Right. So, you know, 10 years even after that, where are we? I think that's a good discussion to, inshallah, have. So I will go ahead and give the floor to Dr. Abdul Rahman, and then we'll take it from there and have our discussion, inshallah.
Thank you, Nihal, and I hope everybody can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Okay, assalamu alaikum. You know, I started to work with Iqbal's poetry at a very young age. And when Amir, my son, was coming back from Harvard University for weekends, I remember I was reading one day and he basically challenged me to read some to him. And suddenly it dawned on me that that was about 100 years after Iqbal's Shiqwa. So I thought maybe, you know, one should really file an appeal to the divine as to see what happened to the case that Iqbal brought forth 100 years ago. So I wrote that little appeal. But before I go into that, and I'm not going to bore you with my poetry, but the idea was, the concept was that the events have not really changed significantly. Although Iqbal had predicted that pretty soon things for the Muslim Ummah will be changing, but again, in the history of nations, in the life of nations, decades are not much. Centuries go by when these mega changes take place. So before I give a little bit of my own poetry, which I will give as a matter of introduction, let me just speak for 2-3 minutes, Nihal, if you don't mind, about Iqbal himself and Shiqwa and Jawab al-Shiqwa. People know Shiqwa and Jawab al-Shiqwa. We have obviously gone over it the last several months. But a few verses I'm going to recite from Iqbal before he wrote the Shiqwa, in which it may be around the same time, but there he introduces himself as to who he really is. And I think it's good for us to know about Iqbal as an individual and as a poet or a philosopher or as a thinker. So unless we use Iqbal's poetry, the session is never complete. So I'm going to say it. Iqbal says, Iqbal bhi Iqbal se agah nahi hai. Even Iqbal is not aware about Iqbal's being. In other words, he's talking about himself. Iqbal bhi Iqbal se agah nahi hai. Iqbal is also not aware about Iqbal's personality. Kuch isme tamaskhur nahi, wallah nahi hai. He says, I swear by God that I'm not joking. Kuch isme tamaskhur. Tamaskhur is joke, something that makes you laugh. He said, when I say this, I'm not really kidding. I'm telling you that even I don't know who I am. Then listen to these 4 ashar that I picked from his nazm, from Bala Jibril. He says, Fitrat ne mujhe bakshe hain Johar Malakuti. Johar is gems or seeds. Malakuti is angelic, being from the Malaika, angels. He says, Fitrat ne mujhe bakshe hain Johar Malakuti. Nature has given me the pearls that are angelic in nature, are seeds, are ideas that are angelic in nature. खाक की हूं मगर खाक से रखता नहीं पैबंद. I am from the dirt, I am from earth. मगर खाक से रखता नहीं पैबंद, but I don't connect myself to this earth. I am not really linked to it. So he's thinking himself beyond this earth at that time. कहता हूं वही बात, समझता हूं जिसे हक. I say exactly what I consider to be the truth. न अबलाए मस्जिद हूं, न तहरीब का फर्जंद. He said, I'm not one of those idiots sitting in the masjid. He was referring to these people that are not intellectually talented, but are leading in masajid, mullah specifically. Not tahreeb ka farzand, nor am I a student of Western culture or new culture that is going around. I do not necessarily subscribe to the current culture, nor am I stuck to the rituals that some illiterate Islamic scholars might be putting forth. Then he says, अपने भी खफा मुझसे हैं, बेगाने भी नाखुश, मैं ज़हर हलाहल को कभी कह न सका कंद. अपने भी खफा मुझसे हैं. My people of my own kind are also angry with me. बेगाने भी नाखुश, and the others that don't know me, they are also unhappy. Why? Because मैं ज़हर हलाहल को कभी कह न सका कंद. ज़हर हलाहल होता है poison that kills you instantaneously. कह न सका कंद. Kand means shakkar, something sweet. Because when I see a poisonous thing, I don't call it sweet. I tell it like it is. And the last verse I'll use is, he says, Chup reh na saka Hazrat Yazda mein bhi Iqbal. Even before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Iqbal could not keep his mouth shut. Karta koi is banda gustakh ka muh band. Kata somebody should really close this person's mouth, this person who is being kind of disrespectful. Gustakh is somebody who does not particularly honor the personality in front of him. So he says, I myself realize that my verbosity or my speech or my sayings may be actually very disrespectful, but this is who I am. And he says, I have angelic nature within me, and I basically stick to the truth. So that is what Iqbal is. Now, if we were to view for the last 110 years, or let's say for the time that Iqbal has been out of the picture since his death, there have been several commentaries about who Iqbal was and what he did, and the concept about thinking of separate homeland for Muslims in India and plight of Muslim community, and how we are all one nation across the globe. Entire earth is our masalla. We can consider each other our brethren. We should not be limited in the boundaries of nations or countries. All of that is something that he obviously put forth as his philosophy. But quite frankly, if you reflect on these verses that he has said, and there are many others that he has mentioned in which he really is giving about his spiritual nature that is not only misunderstood, but actually not even acknowledged. I heavily acknowledge that, and many of you may disagree with me, but I quite frankly feel that he had the abilities that are difficult to comprehend, and probably they were beyond our understanding. In some ways, he was way ahead of his time, and he was intellectually talented and gifted, and such are very special people. Iqbal himself has said about this, the Umar ha dar kaaba o butkhana min alad hayat ta ze bazme ishq yak danae raz ayat baru. He says, for ages and ages, the life goes on crying and wailing in Kaaba, which means in Islamic worship places, And Butkhana means even those who do not believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everywhere the life goes on looking for somebody. Until one day, from the gathering of the people who love, who know love, who do ishq, yakda nairas, one person who knows the secret, ayad baru, he comes out. So a person who knows the inner secret comes out from a gathering of those people who love, who have really kind of reached to the point of ishq, where their love is real and has connected to its creator, that one person comes out from that particular gathering from inside a place. So you have to wait for centuries until somebody like Iqbal or Rumi comes out. So in my judgment, he was one of those that came out after Rumi. And that was really the Nairas, the Noor of the secret. Now, maybe for a couple of minutes here, we can entertain some thoughts and questions about him, and then I'll give a little bit of my poetry also, taken where Iqbal left off, and appealing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as to what is going to happen to us now. Okay, I'm open.
One thing that I was thinking about, I remember some years back when I originally read Jawab al-Shikwa for the first time, and I must have been, I think, I don't know, 19, 20, 21 years old. And I remember during this time period that, you know, he's talking about something back then. Like, he's talking about some ideas which he felt were important to him in 1912 or 1913 or 1909, that time period. I just found it very interesting that now he was coming, or now I was reading him then, and I see literally he's talking about the same exact situation. And when I read that, you know, like for example, you know, things like that, where people had forgotten the spirit of Islam. I wasn't reading that as a Desi. I wasn't reading that as an Indian or a Pakistani or an American. I just saw that as a Muslim. I saw that as a Muslim, people are completely becoming spiritually devoid of their faith. So people will describe themselves as Muslim in culture or Muslim in ethnicity. From what you've seen of Iqbal and reading him holistically, what is the crux? Is there a crux that, or is there a pattern that repeats constantly in Iqbal's poetry holistically that could be seen as his universal message in Shikwa or in Jawab al-Shikwa?
Yes, I think you have the gist of it. He basically was in touch with the Muslim Ummah because he, at a very young age, came out of a very close culture and went to Europe and was exposed to the philosophy of that time and had the occasion of interacting with people that were really, literally, in literature, they were at the top in very noble universities. So he had this vision where he could see our culture back in Indian subcontinent and the Western culture that had really taken over the scientific kind of literature and were coming up with ideas. And obviously they were financially also far advanced in terms of, you know, organizing themselves as nations and governments. So he felt that not only that Muslims were under the rule of other people, but he also felt that they were falling behind and being true to Islam also. So he did find the dichotomy between what we say and what we do, and he highlighted that. His purpose basically would have been probably to point out the flaws and deficiencies that we have, try to correct ourselves, and then regain the position that we had at the time of Ottomans when they were really at top in the world. So yeah, I mean, he did have that feeling that he had for the fall of Islamic civilization, and yet he was very hopeful and he came up with a message of hope.
Thank you, Jazakallah khair. Does anyone else have anything that they'd like to add or a comment they'd like to make? If you do, feel free to unmute.
See if you can unmute everybody from your side. Maybe that will help.
No, I can just ask people to unmute, but yeah, I guess what we can also do from there, it's like if nobody has anything to add, maybe we can kind of jump into the faryad and what you had kind of spoken about that.
Okay. So I will now give one or two verses from faryad and a little bit that I have written about Iqbal in his honor, so that I don't delve too much on my own poetry. Somebody else could do that. I feel embarrassed to do it myself. But anyway, here it goes. The title was Ho Chuki Hai Ek Sadi Iqbal Ko Shikwa Kiye. Now let me say this, that I did not want to write in the same meter of Shikwa or Jawab Shikwa, because I thought that will be kind of not too proper for me, and it may be disrespectful in the eyes of very few people. So I took a different meter and different kind of area. But this is how it went. ये बता कब तक ये मिल्लत खून के आंसू पिए, हो चुकी है एक सदी, इकबाल को शिकवा किए. So is there anybody that doesn't understand Urdu at all, so I can go translating it alongside, or everybody understands it?
I think everyone is good, unless can we get a thumbs up if you understand Urdu?
So this is pretty simple.
Okay. All right, I'll then translate it. I make it hybrid, so I translate it in English also.
Okay.
First band is "Ay Khuda, aaye hain hum dar pe tere kasa liye." Kasa is a bowl that has a beggar has in his hand, and they go around door to door begging. "Ay Khuda, aaye hain hum dar pe tere kasa liye, कांपते होंठों पे तेरी हम का तोहफा लिए, फिर वही अपना पुराना दर्द का किस्सा लिए, एले ईमान की ज़बूं हाली का आईना लिए, जो सुनाया था कभी तुझको वही नगमा लिए, दर्द हाली का लिए, इकबाल का शिकवा लिए. So I'm just saying that we are coming back to you, to your door, and we are bringing up the same story that Iqbal had put forth. Hali, by the way, Altaf Hussain, Hali was anywhere from 1837 to 1914. So that's almost contemporary of Iqbal for some time. And Hali had also written a beautiful Musaddas-e-Hali that described how Muslims were in poor shape at the time. So I quoted both of those, and I said, we are back to you. We brought the pains that were expressed by Hali and Shikwa that Iqbal had put forth. Dusra band. Malik-e kul, Khalik-e kauno makan, परवरदिगार, हाथ है तेरे नज़ामे गर्दिशे लैलो नहार, उन फकां का ज़ाहिर है तुझ पे आश्कार, याद कर इकबाल का वो दीदाए खूनाबा बार, ये बता कब तक वो मिल्लत खून के आंसू पिए, हो चुकी है एक सदी, इकबाल को शिकवा किए. Looking with Malik Kul, the one who is owner of everything, Khalik Kauno Makam, creator of the people and the substance. Kaun is are the people that breathe and live. Makan is the mountains, the rivers, the valleys, and everything else. Parvardigar, creator. Haath hai tere nazame gardishe lailo nahar. Gardishe lailo nahar is the turning around of days into nights and nights into days, passing of time. Un fakan ka zahir batin hai tuj pe ashkar. Everything is aware to you, apparent to you. Yaad kar Iqbal ka wo Deedaye Khunaba Bar. Deedaye Khunaba Bar is a verse that Iqbal used. He looked at the masjid in his Masjid Qurtuba. He wrote this in Nazm Sakliya, which is in his poetry. He says, Role Abdul Khol kar at Deedaye Khunaba Bar. वो नजर आता है तहजीब हिजाजी का मजार. ये इकबाल का शेर है. तो इकबाल ने ये जुमला इस्तेमाल किया, तो I have repeated that, and I said, याद कर इकबाल का वो दीदाए खूनाबा बार. दीदाए खूनाबा बार होता है आंख जो खून के आंसू रो रही होती है. दीदा आंख को कहते हैं, खूनाबा खून से भरी जो खून के आंसू रो रही है. ये बता कब तक ये मिल्लत खून के आंसू पिए. How long can we hold back our tears? And it has been 100 years since Iqbal had complained. Now, of course, I'm not going to recite all of this. I'll just take one or two more ones. एक बंदा करिया करिया फिर रहे हैं आज फरजाने तेरे. Your devotees are now going around in the world in different localities, wandering around. शम में रोशन ढूंढते फिरते हैं परवाने तेरे. We are dying to give our lives up to you, but we are looking for that particular candle, like a moth does, to go and give its life. करिया करिया फिर रहे हैं आज फरजाने तेरे, शम में रोशन ढूंढते फिरते हैं परवाने तेरे, तेरे लुत्फ खास के तालिब ये दीवाने तेरे हैं भरे किसके लिए रहमत के पैमाने तेरे. जाम अब उनको पिला दे उस माए रंगीन के जो कभी आई थी हिस्से में सलाहुद्दीन के. So this basically is saying that we are all wandering around in the world looking for you, looking for us, a mission that we can really do for you. We are tere lutf khas ke talib hain ye deewane tere. We are looking for you for your special blessing towards us. Hain bhare kiske liye rahmat ke paimane tere. Who do you have your glass full of rahma, the mercy? Who are you holding it for? Who are you holding it back for? Why don't you give it to us now? Jam ab inko pula de us maye rangin ke. To give them, let them drink from that particular glass, the same colorful drink that you gave, jo kabhi aayi thi hisse mein Salahuddin ke, that somehow, sometime was became something that Salahuddin Ayyubi was able to drink and do something for Islam and conquer back Quds, Al-Quds, Jerusalem. So let me go to okay, one more about बज़्म आलम में कहीं अपनी पजीराई नहीं, आफियत जिसमें मिले वो कुंजे तन्हाई नहीं, पुरस्कुन कहिए जिसे हम पर घड़ी आई नहीं, क्या तेरी हमसे वो पहली सी शनासाई नहीं, और कब तक है इन्हीं हालात पे रोना हमें, कब मयस्सर आएगा सुख चैन से सोना हमें. हाँ, हमें असलाफ के किस्से पुराने याद हैं, दौलत उस्मानिया के वो खजाने याद हैं, वो सुनहरा दौर वो गुजरे जमाने याद हैं, कुछ नहीं भूला हमें सारे फसाने याद हैं, जिन्स जो असलाफ से पाई थी हमसे छिन गई, जो तेरी हमसे शनासाई थी हमसे छिन गई. This is basically the same kind of a message that Iqbal gave. हैं हमें असलाफ के किस्से पुराने याद हैं. Yes, we remember the stories of our ancestors. दौलत उस्मानिया के वो खजाने. We remember the treasures that Ottoman Empire had. वो सुनहरा दौर, that golden age, वो गुजरे ज़माने याद हैं. We remember those days that have gone by. जिन्स जो असलाफ से पाई थी हमसे छिन गई. Whatever we had acquired from our ancestors, that inheritance has been taken away from us. जो तेरी हमसे शनासाई थी, the one that we knew you the way you knew us, and we were more or less devotees to you, that has been taken away from us. Okay, last two I'm going to recite from my poetry. आज रंजीदा है रुख हर पैकरे तस्वीर का, सर से आंचल छिन रहा है दुख्तरे कश्मीर का, मस्जिद अक्सा हदफ है दुश्मनों के तीर का, मेरे मालिक क्या यही है फैसला तकदीर का, तुझसे सरकश और बाला साहिब ईमान से, था बजा इकबाल को शिकवा तेरे मीजान से. This I want to translate for you because I think this is where I am actually making my point. आज रंजीदा है रुख हर पैकरे तस्वीर का. Any scene, any place that I look at, every place that I look at where Muslims are living, your believers are living, they look very saddened and depressed. Sar se aanchal chin raha hai dukhtere Kashmir ka. The daughter of Kashmir is losing the dupatta from her head covering. She is losing her hijab because she is not able to really protect herself. Masjid Aqsa hadaf hai dushmanu ke tir ka. Even the Masjid Aqsa is now in the sight of the enemies of Islam that have their arrows really pointing towards it. And then I ask, Mere Malik, oh my creator, kya yahi hai faisla takdeer ka? Is this really the decision that you have made for our future. तुझसे सरकश और बाला साहिब ईमान से, those that are really denying your existence are revolting against you, and they are over and above the people of faith. था बजा इकबाल को शिकवा तेरे मीज़ान से. Then I say Iqbal was right when he was complaining about your way of really deciding as to who you are going to favor and who you are not going to favor. Then I said, देख हालत काबुल व कंधार की, बगदाद की, लुट गई वो रश के आलम दौलतें अजदाद की, तजुर्बा गाहें हुनर की, फिक्र की, इजाद की, आबरू है खाक में इस मिल्लत पे नाशाद की. क्या अभी कुछ और दिल पे जख्म खाना है हमें, और कितनी देर अपना मुंह छुपाना है हमें. देख हालत काबुल कंधार की, बगदाद की. See what has happened to Kabul and Kandahar and Baghdad after what we went through now the last few years. लुट गई वो रश की आलम दौलतें अजदाद की. Those resources that we had accumulated in generation, those have been plundered away. तजुर्बा गाहें हुनर की, those research centers, fikr ki, of the new thought processes, ijad ki, and those that were of discovering new things. Abru hai khak mein is millat nashad ki. This community that is unhappy, it has lost all its honor, and its honor has been really smashed into the dirt. क्या अभी कुछ और दिल पे जख्म खाना है? Do we have to really receive much more injury to our hearts, get more pain and suffering? और कितनी देर अपना मुंह छुपाना है हमें? For how much longer have we covered our faces and hide ourselves, hide our true identity as to who we are? So basically, now we have, previously we had lost our possession. Now we are losing our honor and dignity also. And the final band where I actually just finish it in a different way. से ताब थी जिसमें हमें, वो मेरे रोशन अब नहीं, वो गुलिस्तां अब नहीं, शाखे नशेमन अब नहीं. क्या हमारी जिंदगी में इसका फन अब नहीं? क्या तेरी रहमत के लायक अपना दामन अब नहीं? हाँ दिखा दे अब्द को ताज़ा किरण उम्मीद की, देर क्या है खैर हो या रब तेरे खुर्शीद की. I basically end by saying that ताब थी जिससे हमें, whatever used to warm us up, वो मेरे रोशन, that sun that was so bright, that sun, the brightly shining upon us, that used to give us the warmth and the heat, that sun is not shining upon us anymore. वो गुलिस्तां अब नहीं, we don't have that place really to live peacefully. शाखे नशेमन अब नहीं, that branch of a tree on which we used to have our nest, that is gone from us. क्या हमारी जिंदगी में इसका fun अब नहीं? Aren't we the same way respectful to you and honoring you like we always did? क्या तेरी रहमत के लायक अपना दामन अब नहीं? Are we not worthy of your mercy and grace at this time? Then at the end I say, हाँ दिखा दे अब को ताज़ा किरण उम्मीद की. Show us a ray of hope now, a new ray of hope to us now. देर क्या है? What is the delay? What is taking you so much time? खैर हो या रब तेरे खुर्शीद की. Oh Allah, I just pray for that your khurshid, your son, stays aglow and stays safe. That's how you usually, when you ask something or beg something from somebody, you have to give a little praise or something. So it's a poetic thing to end by saying, oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we still are wishing well, but we need something from you, because that's what we feel we deserve. So that's what is a sampling of what I wrote. Of course, it's a fairly long appeal. I'm going to read all of that, but this I thought was to highlight how our civilization has been destroyed. First, it was the Afghanistan war that really, destroyed our culture and destroyed our historical places. Of course, Baghdad was destroyed. Prior to that, Iraq was devastated. Places in Middle East here are also uh, in a way in shambles. There are people that are lost their homes and immigrating, and nobody wants to accept them, and all of that can be highlighted and is being highlighted. But this is something that I had written 11 years ago, and it's really mind-boggling that Iqbal was able to see this, and things have not really changed very much from that time. I will not go any more in my own poetry, but if we have to now, let's hear from others, and then I will give a little bit of my own statement about Iqbal, how I feel about him, and what I have put down in writing, like Iqbal did for Rumi, I did for Iqbal. So I have.
Assalamu alaikum. May I say a few words? I mean, it is subhanallah. I mean, your poetry is amazing. I mean, I was just listening to it. It's so beautiful.
Thank you.
You have put down all the emotions that I'm telling you that I was feeling when I was seeing all these events happening, and you have put them down so beautifully in those words. I really have high regard for you're such a great poet, mashallah, mashallah. Yeah, very, very nice. Very beautifully said, and everything is in there. Yeah, whatever is happening with the Ummah for so many years, whatever is happening.
There's a whole lot in there that I write, but I cannot even recite it because I become tearful, really.
Yeah, I was crying when you were reciting it. There was tears falling down my eyes. Yeah, I could feel the pain. Yeah.
It's very difficult, but that's exactly what's going on. What can one do?
Yeah.
However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a better plan. So hopefully we have to be always grateful for his mercy and grace. Yeah. And I'm sure he'll bring us out of this.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
You know, one thing I was thinking about, there's a really interesting documentary on Netflix about the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottomans, they had conquered Constantinople, which is present-day Istanbul, in like 1453 or something around that time. And it led to the end of the Byzantine Empire, and it led to the rise of the Ottomans, right, for the next 600 or so years or 500 or so years. But what's most interesting is that in 1453, that happened, and then in 1492, another Muslim empire fell, which was in its peak, which is Spain, Granada. Right? Yes. And one thing it reminded me of is that there was a poem which I remember reading. It was لكل شيء إذا ما تم نقصانه فلا يغر بطيب العيش إنسان, which was that everything which reaches its peak, every civilization which comes to its height, eventually will begin its downfall. So everything that hits its high doesn't eventually stay high, it comes down. So a good life or a very sanctimonious life is not one which should deceive us. You know, we should be very aware as to how we lead our lives, but also to realize, because I remember Dr. Saab in the right before the Faryad, you had written right before the actual abiyat, the lines. You had mentioned that we're living here in the United States, and now there are places coming up where people are becoming huffaz, and you have masajid everywhere, and you have all these different things. And it's just really interesting because I think about this, and sometimes you hear people say stuff like, oh, yahan ka tehzeeb sahi nahi, yahan ka culture sahi nahi, or something like that, right? But it's just like, agar yahan ka culture sahi nahi tha, then where did all these madaris come from? Why is it people are coming to America from different countries and waking up about their faith? Agar yahan ka tehzeeb itna bigda hua hai, right? It's a real question, right? इतनी खराब तहजीब है, यहाँ पे लोग को क्यों एहसास हो रहा है? पाकिस्तान, इंडिया में क्यों आपको एहसास हुआ? जो आपको अपने वो religion पे और faith पे वो थोड़ा बहुत तवज्जो देने की जरूरत है. Yes. Right? And that's something that I was thinking about at that point. Like people sometimes are like, that's where our nationalism comes into place, and that's where Iqbal is saying it doesn't matter where you go, right? तुम यूसुफ हो, तुम्हारा कानान जहाँ भी होना है वही होना चाहिए तुम्हारे लिए. Right? And this happens to be our Quran right now. And this is where we need to be focused on, is that we're in America. We're no better than any other Muslim, but if Allah has put us in a place, we need to take advantage of it. It's as simple as that.
Exactly.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. I just wanted to add a few points, if possible.
Sure.
So, a really good and great tribute by Dr. Abdul Rahman, what he had attributed for Imam Iqbal, it goes beyond how your poetry expresses and kind of reflects what Iqbal was also trying to convey, 110 years ago. So I wanted to request, is it possible, because you recited part of your poem or part of the verses, that possibly share, because it's really a good piece of literature and very thought-provoking, how you're kind of challenging what Iqbal was originally communicating in terms of shikwa. So one thing I wanted to request, if it's possible, to share where your poetic verses, because it's a great tribute, and I haven't come across something so finely written and very well expressed what Iqbal was trying to convey.
So you want me to give you a couple of more bunts from my poetry? I don't mind doing that.
No, I was wondering, is it possible? Do you have any PDF or anything that also look in our free, spare time and kind of memorize it?
It's in this book. I don't know if you've gotten this, Qasim. This is Dr. Rahman's commentary on the Shikwa and Jawab Shikwa. If you actually, I'll put the email in the chat. But if you email this person, he can send you a copy of the entire book, and that's where Dr. Rahman's Faryad is actually at the end of it.
Oh, okay, great. Is it available on Amazon or somewhere?
It's not available on Amazon yet, but if you, I'm sending you Brother Sajid's email. Brother Sajid can just send you a copy.
My book, Brother Sajid, and my poetry is in there too with the Shikwa, Jawab Shikwa. So this is exactly what you're looking for, and Brother Sajid can send you. I had given them about 100 copies, so they have it.
Okay, great. One thing I wanted to ask you is that when Iqbal wrote Shikwa, did he have the Jawab Shikwa in mind, writing all those, complaints and all those, or do you think that as a part of that, the necessity of that time when people started, accusing him that he's going against the principles of nature and he's trying to, be disrespectful to the divine? Was it that he wrote Shikwa with the Jawab Shikwa in mind, or sometimes there's a conflict where they say that the Jawab Shikwa was thought after people started accusing Iqbal that he got beyond the limits of humanity and human nature on challenging the divine?
This was the same question I had when I actually originally read about this thing, and I go along with the point of view that he actually did not have that in mind when he wrote Shikwa, and he wrote Jawab Shikwa after going through all that critique. I say this because it took him 3 years to bring Jawab Shikwa forth. He wrote the Shikwa in 2009, 1909, and then Jawab Shikwa came in 13. Although he had written it in 12, but he actually presented it in an open gathering in 913. So it's almost like 3 years later. So I have a feeling that he felt the need to come with it, because if he had thought about that Shikwa, Jawab Shikwa together, then the time difference between these two nazms would not have been that much. But again, nowhere in literature, nowhere where he admits or denies that he was writing it when people were criticizing it, he does not really counter that argument. So chances are that after he got the critique, then he came up with the idea of coming up with the Jawab Shikwa, and he wrote it. And that's what I believe. But if you do not look at the history or the critique that went on, then it looks sequential. It looks as if he was really, Jawab Shikwa was his priority, and basically wrote Shikwa just to challenge his mind so that he can actually come up and address all those shortcomings that Muslims had at the time. So, but that's a good point to ponder. And the critique at that time was really severe. People that were very close to him, that were intellectually at his caliber and level, the writers and thinkers and politically recognized entities, they all had started to get, keep a distance from him, because some of the language that he had used was not customary at the time, or not something palatable to everyone. So yes, Yeah, it seems to me that that he probably had an afterthought and then he wrote Jawab-e-Shikwa.
Okay, thank you so much for the explanation. One more question I wanted to ask is that since 110 years, do you think, in your perspective, that there has been anyone even close to what Iqbal was? You know, if you read Shikwa, Jawab-e-Shikwa, Iblis Ki Majlis-e-Shura, Mussolini, and all that, it's been 110 years. But to your to your exposure and to your knowledge, do you think anybody even came close to him? And if not,
Absolutely not. And not only that, that kind of poetry, purposeful poetry, the one that is recommended, that one that is accepted in Islam, that poetry is not being done anywhere, the way I see it. People are doing poetry, at least the halqas that I know, which is totally not recommended, I would say. Poetry is purposeful. Poetry is real poetry. Anything that does not have any message is not really appreciated. Quran in chapters Ashura basically describes that the poets are wandering in the world and say things that they don't do, and it's a waste of time. You will not find anything like that in Iqbal's poetry. Open any, take Kulliyat or take any of his Persian kalam and open any page, and you will find that every verse that he has written, especially after 1910, is purposeful. In the beginning, when he wrote a little bit for the school children and for light-hearted people in his early Urdu poetry, there he was basically catering to the trends. But even there, none of the poetic verses are jisko kehte hain na bharti ke sher, just to fill up and rhyme it. He never did that. That kind of poetry is not seen right now anywhere, and I look for it. I can't find it.
But do you think that because he was such a larger than life figure, and his Persian kalam is in fact more influential, Israr Bekhudi. So why is it that in the Islamic world in general and the global world in precise, why is that this hidden gem is not exposed even in Pakistan and India? His kalam is not openly discussed. Do you think there is some reservations that people, or politically, that he's not brought to the surface? The younger generation doesn't even know that we had such a such a huge personality who could have impacted a better part of the Muslim world in general. But it's just that people are unaware that there's so little exposure of his kalam, of his translation, of his vision. Do you think that there is something holding back, that people, that there is some reasoning not brought to the surface, and his stuff is not, his poetic and his message is not communicated the way he wanted it to be? And the other thing, one last question is, what is your favorite part of Iqbal's poetry? I would love to know that too.
Number one, you have two very excellent points that you made. And let me just explain it to you by saying that it's not by design that people do not bring his poetry forward. There is no malice against him. It's just that people are totally unaware of that kind of perspective on life. And people have become, we as human family have become more materialistic and more matter of fact in terms of what we face every day. So this spiritual poetry, even the poets of big caliber, with good diction and good background in learning, even they cannot relate to it. You see, Iqbal himself says, "Har sina nasheman nahi Jibril Amin ka, har fikr nahi taire Firdaus ki sayyad. Go fikr khuda dad se roshan hai zamana, azadi afkar hai iblis ki ijad." Now, when you say every thought process that comes to people, it's not necessarily something that is divinely inspired or whatever. So Iqbal was one of a kind, just like Rumi was. When Rumi did his poetry, he was not thinking that I'm going to sit down and do this poetry on this bear. He would just continue talking, and people around him would start writing. So this was divinely inspired, kind of a message that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose for them to give. Similarly, Iqbal, I think, was really one of a kind. And when he went into this particular poetic way in expressing his message, he used poetry to give a message, then it became fairly easy for him. And not everyone can connect to it. It's like, I'm going to give you an example that is, of course, I'm using a different one, but I don't compare that. I'm comparing Quran with this, but I'm just saying Al-Quran also has this miracle that you can read it, and yet each time you ponder over it, you will get newer and newer depths and meanings. Similarly, the spiritual poetry and the poetry of this nature, it's not very easy to connect to. People may think that they understand it, but they really don't. And I clearly feel that it's not by design. It's just the way the humans are. It takes, like I said in the beginning, that I quoted a share, Persian share of Iqbal, in which I said that, you know, it takes ages and ages when people are looking for somebody like this that comes out from a bazme ishq. Umr hat dar kaba but khana minalad hayat ta ze bazme ishq yak danai raz ayat baru. You wait for ages and ages and roam around. The life roams around in the worldly things as well as in religious areas, places, until one final day, a person that is knower of secrets, a person with the knowledge of the true secrets comes out and then delivers this message. So this is the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created this world, it seems. And people like that come in every maybe century or century and a half, somebody like this comes up, which does the kind of a tajdeed hayat or tajdeed pagham or whatever, the renovation, I mean, not innovation, a revival of that message.
Right.
So, yeah, nobody has come up with Iqbal, not yet. We are waiting.
Yeah. Dr. Saab, I have to step away. So I'm just going to leave the video on, but I just had something come up right now. So inshallah, I hope everyone, we will meet again next week. So we're going to still continue for the next 8 minutes, but I just have to step away. But we're going to talk again next week about what we're going to be doing in regards to these shura and some other, you know, questions you may all have based on the material, inshallah. So
what do you want me to do?
I think people still have questions, Dr. Saab. As soon as they're done, we can just close out. So.
Okay.
I think Muqaddas had a question, but from myself, inshallah, I will talk to you all soon.
I'll be here and answer the question. Then if I'll go until 9:30 at least. And
yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, please.
Right,
go ahead. What is the next question?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
बहुत अच्छा लगा आपकी पोएट्री सुनते हुए आज, और it made me think about how Iqbal would react if he was alive today in the world, like so globalized, so connected, and जैसे हम लोग cell phone का ज़माना है, computer का ज़माना है, internet का ज़माना है. So I just wrote a few things in my Urdish.
Yes.
Good job. My daughter wants my attention. Give me 1 second. Sorry.
Of course. But Iqbal, I mean, if he was around, he would understand exactly what is going on, because I think this is exactly what he was foreseeing, that mil gaye Kaabe ko paswa mil gaye Kaabe ko sanam khane se. This will happen. People will करेंगे अहले नजर ताज़ा बस्तियां आबाद मेरी नजर में ही कूफा और बगदाद. So he knew that अहले नजर लोग जो हैं वो दुनिया में फैल जाएंगे, or they will spread the message, and this message will get to the corners of the world, and he would be very happy to see that Muslims, for reasons that may be different and divergent, reasons that may not be understood clearly, may appear as if we are migrating because of difficulties in our times, but there may be a purpose behind people migrating in different areas and then having their families grow up here, and those people that have that seed within them coming up and spreading this. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, but I know if Iqbal was alive today, he would be exactly, he will not be surprised at all. He would see the fulfillment of his dream that he had, that this will happen. And of course, he didn't mean that it will happen next week. He knew that eventually this is going to happen.
So मैं आप ही की पोएट्री के कुछ वर्ड उठाकर, so I tried a little. एक सदी गुजर गई इकबाल को शिकवा किए हुए, एक सदी में जमाने के अंदाज बदल गए, मोहम्मद की वफा से आज ना वाकिफ है मुसलमान, हाथ में मोबाइल का मौजज़ा लिए हुए।
बहुत अच्छा।
बस अभी इतना ही लिखा, मैं आपकी बातें सुन रही थी और मैं वही सोच रही थी कि ये हम लोग कहाँ पे खड़े हैं आज ना। हम लोग हकीकतें भी हैं हमारे सामने, हर चीज है, लेकिन जैसे जैसे हम लोग इकबाल को पढ़ते हैं, खुद कुरान को पढ़ते हैं, और फिर हम सोचते हैं कि हम लोग आज कहाँ खड़े हैं, कहाँ पे क्या कर रहे हैं, कैसे जिंदगी का जो एक तरीका हमें बता दिया गया है, फिर भी सब कुछ हमारे हाथ में है, लेकिन हम लोग आंखें नहीं खोल रहे। So
that's what happened.
If I may say,
Ji, please.
His poetry is universal.
Yes.
It's applicable in all ages. Today, his poetry is versatile, universal. Whatever you say, and I use it all the times.
Of course.
It's applicable in every situation, daily situation. You know, whatever. All right, sister, Islam had difficulty. He said very clearly, "Jume goyam balarzam, kedanam mushkilate la ilara," and it is true all the times. It's universal. Agar khahi hayat andar khatarzi. It's applicable all along, everywhere. If you want, if you want to live a successful life, then take challenges. They were true at Prophet's time. They are true in our time too. So all his poetry is totally universal, like you know, rules from Holy Quran. His poetry is spiritual translation of Holy Quran. Yes.
Beautiful, beautifully said. I'm glad you mentioned that, because
if you read Holy Quran and you will say, no, it's the same Quran and it is good and we follow it. His poetry is exact spiritual translation, and we are lucky to have it in our language. Even the people who know Arabic, they learn whole Quran, they don't understand it. And we are lucky, his every verse is a part of the Holy Quran. And people understood each verse fascinates. I don't know if you know, Sadr Ayub wrote a book.
Somebody wrote for him.
Yeah, okay, wrote, but still his imagination was there. Yes, brother, he's right. Yes, but still that was the universal situation. Yes, he used it in politics. Yes, and that was,
he inspired quite a.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It inspired and inspiration.
Same thing today.
Yes.
These are the things too then, and today it's the same too.
Just to add to that, according to his son, so, you know, Iqbal, he says, really didn't have any special lagaw poetry say, like he always thought he had a very short time in this world. So if he's thought that if he was to use Nasr to convey the message, it would really take a very long time, and poetry usually catches, you know, you in a much different way. And that was one of the things. And the other thing was that always when he wrote, you know, he would have his kalam and board and a copy of his Quran with him.
Oh yeah,
so,
very good.
So it's not a surprise, you know, when we see this. The other thing I was going to say was that one of the concepts that you used, and Dr. Saab, you also used Salahuddin Ayyubi in your ashar. One of the things that we try to do, I think, is that, whenever we try to think of ruling, something, it automatically creates a situation where whoever is in power, we've seen through this centuries, our Quran and Bible and we'll talk about Namrud and Pharaoh, and so whenever they are threatened, they just will go to no limit to try to annihilate you. So maybe what we need to do is, because it doesn't matter who's in power, the real thing that matters is to somehow convey that message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that has come through prophets and through Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is what probably should be more important than really ruling any country or ruling the world or anything. More important is to see that his message and what he has conveyed through all the generations is what we should try to promote, so that maybe that will not create the enmity that we see every time that you try to think in terms of gaining power somewhere, or so that's one of the thought I had was maybe we have to change our thinking in some way.
I am not quite clear if you feel that somehow or the other, being a pacifist and trying to spread everything by peaceful manners, that we will be able to do a better job than by defending. You see.
Okay, no, let me just answer that. I'm sorry to cut you, but the number of Muslims, for example, in India were about 13 to 15% starting from the very early people who invaded India.
Right.
So even during Mughals' time, that number really did not change much. So what I'm trying to say is that it was not that they ruled those places that we have Muslims in the Indian subcontinent. It is because of our awliya, that Nizamuddin and Data Ganj Bakhsh, and those who were there really were the ones who were the reason for all the Muslims that we have. So it's that, and again, as the share that we've said so many times, Yakeem Hukam, Amal Paham, Muhabbat Fateh Alam. So that part of the process probably has much more effect than just being rulers or conquering, that we obviously always look towards.
Yeah. No, there's no question
Absolutely.
about. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Somebody wanted to say something, right? No? Okay. Well, you see, human society goes through certain changes, and sometimes it becomes necessary to more or less preserve what you have by defending yourself.
Yes.
So that is okay. However, need for is different. Now, very interesting point I want to make, and just think it through as I say it. There are pockets of human society where they are very fertile to accept the message, because they really do not have a very strong faith system that to adhere to. I find where we are now to be one such place. And if we live by our principles, like those spiritualists that lived in India when they went there, and they were basically living a spiritual life and giving a spiritual message to the people that came to them. They were not going door to door to be missionaries, but people came to them and they gave the message. Similarly, I feel that this may be by design of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that there is the diaspora of believers now, and wherever they go, they might find societies that are eager and looking for a message that they can really relate to. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But yeah,
I totally agree with you, Doctor, because I was very surprised to see one time that the number of people who changed their religion in this country
is far.
was like 20 to 30%. Now, most
Yeah.
of them change from one, line of Christianity to another line of Christianity, but there are people who are willing to change their beliefs. The number is really very high. So as
Very
you
high.
said, maybe we are not doing a good job, so that we need to work more on this.
Now, I think we are doing a great job. I'm very
I see.
optimistic, quite frankly.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
we as believers have done significantly well in this country than most other immigrants have done elsewhere. We have an example of Britain before us. They are about 40, 50 years ahead of us. When people went there, they did not accomplish that much in that time that we were able to accomplish in the last, let's say, 40 years, 50 years that I've been here.
Right.
So
The reason, I'm sorry again, the reason is that the people who went to, as you know, Britain were really not the educated class. They, went for a different group of people migrated
That's
there.
right. They were there, yeah, to serve.
Yeah, so there's a big difference between the migrants in that were there. Thankfully, now the children obviously in Europe are getting educated, and they are, I think, doing very well. But the initial migrants to Europe, especially to England, were really ones who were not very educated themselves.
Yes, beautiful. So
Yeah, that's true. Well, most people who went to Europe, they did not find opportunities at home, and they left home and went to Europe. Yes.
exactly. So let me finish it now. We are getting closer to it by just giving few verses that I wrote for Iqbal. Maqam Iqbal.
Irshad.
हजरत इकबाल की अजमत की बातें क्या करूं, सोच का मौसम बदल जाए जो उसका नाम लूं, कारवां सालार वो राजे खुदी का पासबां, फलसफे में गैरत सुकरात रश के अफलातूं, और फिक्र से अपनी जमाने को दिगरगूं कर गया, आशनाए शोरश अफलाक था उसका जुनून, और बज़्म फितरत की तमाशाई थी उसके दिल की आंख, जानता था मिल्लत लाचार का सोजे दरूं, आसमां वालों को उसकी गुफ्तगू अच्छी लगी, वरना मिलता उसके शिकवे को परे परवाज क्यों। और आखिरी मिसरा जो है वो इकबाल का है, उम्रहा दरकाबा बुतखाना मी नौलद हयात, ताज बज़्म इश्क यक दानाए राज आयत बरूं। ये मैंने तज़मीन उसके शेर पे की है।
बहुत खूब।
Beautiful.
Yeah, the man was in touch with the needs of the believers, and he knew exactly what he was. About his poetry, इतना सख्त उसने एक शेर कहा है जो कुलियात इकबाल के बैक कवर पे लिखा हुआ है, जो कहता है कि मैं शायर, मुझे शायर मत कहो। ये ईरान में, पर्शियन में एक तरह का एक गाली तो नहीं, लेकिन एक बड़ा क्या कहते हैं सख्त जुमला होता है, नबीनी खैर, उस बंदे की खैर ना हो, वो खैर ना देखे। इकबाल कहता है नबीनी खैर अजाम मर्दे फरोदस्त के बरमन तोबते शेरो सुखन बस्त। वो आदमी जो मुझे तोहमत लगाता है कि मैं शायर हूँ, शेर सुखन कहता हूँ, उस बंदे की खैर ना हो। यानी कि he is so sure that he wants to be identified not as a poet, but somebody who is giving a message of social reform for Islamic community. So it's amazing. I did not know that नबीनी खैर, ना बीनी खैर, वो खैरियत ना देखे। अज़ाम मर्दे वो जो आदमी जो है मेरे तरफ दस्त दराजी कर रहा है, मुझे शायर कह रहा है, उसकी खैर ना हो। तो इकबाल was so much sure that his notoriety or his fame will not be necessarily for his poetry, but the message that he has conveyed through the verses, that would be. And at another point he said that अगर मैंने कहीं भी if any of my poetry is contradicting or out of the message of the Quran, then may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deprive me from the being close to our beloved Prophet on the day of judgment, and he keep me from kissing his feet. So in other words, he said that I am said that true to my delivery of message, that I have made sure that I say nothing that goes against Quran or the message of our beloved Prophet.
Actually, every verse came from Holy Quran in a beautiful manner
Beautiful. Yes.
that appeals.
Yes.
Chume goyam balarzam ke danam.
आप ये
Here,
चुमे गोयम के बाद मुसलमानम कहा करें ना, चुमी गोयम
chume
मुसलमानम
goyam musalmanam
हाँ, चुमी गोयम मुसलमानम मिलर
ke danam mushkilate la ilara.
हाँ,
There are Arabic words
yes,
which Arabs don't understand its language, but we understand it better.
right.
See, so there was no language barrier either in his.
For him, yeah, he was perfect in Arabic and Persian and Urdu, of course, and then somewhat German also. So he was one of a kind. Like I said, it takes generations before somebody like him.
It took 600 years for him to come after Rumi.
Right.
So you need हजारों साल नरगिस अपनी उस पे
पर होती
है जी, बड़ी मुश्किल से होता है चमन में दीदावर पैदा. तो going back मैं सोच रहा था कि जो शिकवा भी है ये I think it's really, क्योंकि young age पे उन्होंने लिखा, तो I think it more than शिकवा, it was really just जैसे किसी कौम को झंझोड़ के या किसी के कान खड़े कर देने वाली बात करो कि वो अटेंशन लाने के लिए.
उसके बैकग्राउंड में हम नहीं गए इतना ज्यादा, लेकिन मैं जैसे कहा ना, हाल ही ने अभी बड़ी आसान उर्दू में मुसद्दस लिखी थी, जिसमें इस्लाम की ज़बून हाली का था. तो जब इकबाल ने उसको देखा और उससे मुतासर हुआ, तो उसने अपने अंदाज में कहना शुरू किया. उस वक्त हालांकि इकबाल फारसी में कह रहा था, तो लोगों ने उसको मजबूर किया कि आप उर्दू में कुछ कहें. और फिर वो तंजीम चल रही थी, तो तंजीम में कुछ ना कुछ शेर कहना पड़ता था. So he wrote it for that purpose at the time. Jawab Shikwa is where he actually thought it through and came across a person that had a message. Yes. Very good.
Anyway, डॉक्टर साहब वो आपने अपना शेयर किया, sorry, हमारे साथ शेयर किया, तो I really appreciate it. It was really beautiful. So thank you very much.
Not at all. Not at all. मैं इकबाल की वजह से मैंने शेयर करना शुरू किया. Quite frankly, he's my
Iqbal is the only person or poet who really reached in depth Jalaluddin Rumi's kalam. Nobody else was able.
Nobody else can, exactly. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Fascinating part is Jalaluddin Rumi is known as the best read poet in the United States.
Yes. I would go and say in the world right now, because everywhere else he was famous anyway.
Yeah.
The United States is fairly new in discovering him in the last 3 or 4 decades. Yeah. So yes, he is the very well read poet, and basically the reason is that his spirituality it transcends any nationalism, and he called himself Rumi, but he's Balakhi, sitting in Turkey, which is no longer the Rumi, not called Rumi anymore.
Yeah.
So he has become an international person, then anybody and everybody can own him. And he manifested that during his life, because his followers, we are told, were more of other faiths than Muslims, because they took the apparent meanings of the words, not realizing the spiritual meaning that he was really dealing with when he talked about wines and stuff. Yes.
And Iqbal, actually in Europe, Iqbal is a lot more popular than Rumi.
Yes.
Goethe, he was the famous national poet, German.
Yes.
And he stole, they call it Madde Moment. Here we call Madde Moment, and they call strong man of Europe.
Yes.
Their qualities are exactly the same.
Exactly.
And Allama Iqbal used to keep Holy Quran with him all the time. Oh my God. So Goethe says, or somebody says, you took these things stole from Goethe, and he brought the Holy Quran and showed them they are from 5th, 6th, 7th century, and my Kalam is coming that old. So how Goethe could, he's stealing from me. So that's the, situation. So, and his philosophy was, the last paper he wrote, Time, Space and Religion, was like Einstein's theory, which was supposed to be presented at Oxford. Time, Space and Religion.
Right.
That how these things relate with each other.
Right.
Spiritual power connect with human being and how they change the world. And it still stands.
Iqbal basically acknowledges those philosophers and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Only if they were to recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they were very good. So Iqbal said, agar hota wo majzoob farangi is zamane mein, to Iqbal usko samjhata maqam kibriya kya hai. The moment that they had described in Goethe's stuff basically was very, 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 very close, except at the end, they did not attribute it to divine. Otherwise, concept was there, and they had basically similar kind of faith.
Same qualities,
yes. So this is why the confusion in India, and that maybe he's stealing from Goethe, but Iqbal was not stealing. Iqbal basically had studied those people through, and he was trying to connect to that culture and yet bring out the message of Islam. Yes. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a good point to make, because whenever you shine and become way ahead of your contemporaries or peers, these are the kinds of things that are thrown at you, and this is natural. Nothing really unexpected. I remember when I, out of nowhere at age 40, went to a mushaira and started to give my poetry. Not one person believed it, that this is mine. And one very well respected poet that I respected at that time, he was so sure that I stole it from somebody that I was shocked. And then later on, of course, that particular behavior actually strengthened my belief in myself. That I said, there must be something in this poetry that they feel that I cannot do it, which means it's good. Iqbal basically, when he manifested these thoughts, he was so much above what was going on in that time's India that they started to think that he's probably copying and westernizing this and westernizing that, but he was way ahead of his time.
Oh, he was a really futurologist.
Yes, exactly.
When he was, China was the poorest country on earth.
Yes.
He predicted 50 years China will be the most powerful nation.
Country, yes.
He predicted. And similarly, he predicted so many things that we cannot even imagine. Staron se aage jahan aur bhi hain, abhi ishq ke imtihan aur bhi hain.
Exactly.
So he said in the 1920s, and mankind went to the space in 1970s. So he said 50 years ago. Staron se, and very simple. Staron se aage jahan aur bhi hain, abhi ishq ke. And this takes, ishq is the tremendous, this is such a deep poetry. It takes love and power to go to the moon. And he said right there.
Yeah.
Oh my God, nobody could enlighten like this now.
That's what he said. Jahan mein ahle iman surat khurshid jeete hain. Idhar doobe udhar nikle, udhar doobe idhar nikle.
Oh, yes.
When he says, tu raze kun faqah hai, apni aankhon par aya ho ja, khudi ka razdan ho ja, khuda ka tarjuma ho ja. Can you imagine that? खुद ही में डूब जा गाफिल, ये सिर्रे जिंदगानी है, निकल कर हल्का शामो सहर से जावेदा हो जा. So he knew the potential of man, and
Absolutely. Khudi is kind of spirit. Yes.
yes, exactly.
Absolutely.
So Iqbal, like I said, is Danai Raz, to put it in one word.
Yeah.
He was aware of the secret of life,
Yeah.
and he left tremendous treasure. You know, I have been trying for the last several years to do what I can to provide his message to our children and grandchildren here, in making sure that we keep the original Persian and Urdu also, but then make it in simple English so people at least know who these entities are, and who knows, down the road, these may be the very, very popular foreign languages that our grandchildren will be learning, living in these lands. So they need the material, the academic material, literary material that we have. You know, I have it, and I'm sure you have it, but do our children have it? And will, you know, should we expect them to have it when they grew up here and were born here? So I think that literature has to be created so that Iqbal's message stays alive. Now, Iqbal is more taught in Iran than it is in Pakistan. And in Pakistan, they've taken away his holiday also. It is out of literature.
Oh, yeah, you're right. His best poetry is in Persian, yes.
Persian, and in Iran, he's very famous, Iqbal Lahori. But in Pakistan, not many academic centers talk about him. And when I hear Iqbal's poetry in universities in Pakistan, I'm embarrassed. They cannot even pronounce proper. Even his Urdu, they cannot pronounce properly, recite properly, never mind his Persian.
Absolutely.
And that is a deficiency that we have to correct somehow.
He went to Munich University and his thesis was philosophy of Iran.
Yes.
And it became so popular. It came all from Holy Quran.
Persia, yes.
And, yeah. And it became very popular in Europe. So European are the best people who benefited from him. Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely. More than Muslims, more than any other nation, yes.
Well, I'm glad that
all of us, we call him poet, but European understand his spiritual power, yes.
Yes, he definitely was a person full of ishq, full of passion, full of junoon.
Yeah.
And that is what is difficult to erase. So this thing will survive on its own, mashallah.
I wanted to ask Dr. What is your favorite poem of Iqbal and why?
My favorite poem of Iqbal, quite frankly, from Javed Nama. I have several verses in there, but if you go with the Urdu one, to me, Shikwa and Jawab Shikwa is my favorite. And then next comes the kya kehte hain wo jo hai Tulu Islam. These are simple, but have a tremendous message in these poems. Masjid-e-Qurtuba is another one, and then Iblis ki Majlis-e-Shura. These are easy ones in Urdu, but again, I can't find any verse in Iqbal's Kulliyat that I don't like. It's amazing that it's difficult to pick one, and just about anywhere I pick up, I can, for one verse, you can talk for an hour. Can you imagine, right now in front of me is Ghubar Aluda hai rango nasab hai baalo par tere tu hai murge haram udne se pehle parfashan ho ja. Can you imagine that impact? It says Ghubar Aluda hai rango nasab, yani ke your wings, your energy has been adulterated by community, nasl and nasab, main raja hu, main rajput hu, main falana hu. तुम्हारे बालों पर जो है इस वजह से they are become adulterated and contaminated and become ineffective. तू है मुर्गे हराम. O believer in Islam, उड़ने से पहले परफशा हो जा. Before you get out from here and go somewhere else, throw these things away somewhere. और अपने परों को फेंक दे. so that you become pure again. So, I mean, can you take just this message coming out of Pakistan and India and wherever we come from, and we come here, we should throw those cultural baggage that we have, about culture and about nationalities and about groups and communities and all that, and become just one as a Muslim. That's it. That's your identity. Because he recognized that we have really divided ourselves into this, that, and the other, and those identities are keeping us back. Anywhere you read in Iqbal, any particular, if you think it through, in my judgment, every share has at least 5-6 depths in it. So more you think about it, more you realize he really understood the melody we had, the shortcomings we had, and the message that he gave will be there for a while. It's not something that is temporary and will phase out in a certain period. It will live forever. यकीन अफराद का सरमाया तामीर मिल्लत है, यही कुव्वत है जो सूरत गरे तकदीर मिल्लत है. You write your destiny by faith. यकीन पे हम अमल यकीन मोहकम. He's basically giving messages from Al-Quran, and difficult to say where. I mean, you just it's amazing. If you read Masjid al-Qurtuba and the way he wrote it and the way he feels the pain of Muslim downfall, it's amazing, amazing read. I don't know whether we will have time to cover these things because Nihal wanted to take up Majlis Iblis ki Majlis Shura, which is a very unique way of Iqbal delivering a message. Just like here, it was Shikwa, where the deficiencies were kind of covered and only the pain was highlighted. Similarly, in Iblis ki Majlis Shura, basically the deficiencies of Islam are recognized by Iblis, and he's trying to say what the Muslims, how you can put down Islamic faith by divesting the Muslim people into different things other than the following their beloved Prophet. When we go through this, you will understand Iqbal has used that kind of a method to highlight our deficiencies by using Iblis as somebody who is pointing out what is flaw, and he's telling his disciples to keep Muslims immersed in that kind of a nonsense so that they do not go towards the love of the Prophet that they have in their hearts. Iqbal has his own way of teaching and giving message forward, which is quite challenging. Nihal, you're not back, it seems. Okay, so we'll have to just leave it there until we meet again next week. Allah Hafiz, everybody. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
I think we will have to see. He will probably shut it from his side, but we will have to think it through next week as to how we go through Ramadan, and then when we come back, hopefully we will have a better kind of a idea as to how we proceed. We can go through Iqbal's teachings for years and not yet, get the surface of it. So we will have enough material, inshallah. Okay. Shabba khair. Allah Hafiz. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Nihal is back, it seems. Okay.